ITAL Committee, February 13th, 2019.
Great contract.
Good morning. Welcome. Welcome everybody. Gosh, we got a full house. Call this meeting to order. Say February 13th. I'm just going to move straight into the agenda. Dick is not coming. He is unfortunately double knee surgery is what I heard. And so let's move right into the agenda and approval of the meeting minutes from last month. What do you have?
I did read the minutes, and I move approval of. There is one clarification. You want to do it now or on your report?
I'll do it on my report if that's okay
fine.
with you.
And I do move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, so we got a motion by Jonathan and a second by Stuart. Any discussion? Yeah, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item number 2, public comment. Do we have anybody from the public? I don't have any speaker slips. Any comments from the committee? Do you have anything interesting? No? All right. Move on to item number 3, our consent calendar. We've got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the consent. Does anybody want to pull anything off or have questions on any of the consent items?
We do have all the local jurisdictions here.
Okay.
The ones that are requesting extensions. If you have questions.
Do you want to hear from jurisdictions? Do you have any questions? Does anybody move?
I'll move the consent.
We have a motion by Brad.
Second.
I second.
Second by Stuart. Any discussion? Good morning.
So the chair wouldn't mind, now that we have our executive director here, if we could go back to.
Do you want to vote on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't vote. Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry about that.
So the only one with the recommended is item number 3. So all those in favor of the motion? It's unanimous, right? Go ahead, Irene.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
So under public comments, actually, our executive director had a few words he wanted to say about the regional plan update.
Thank you, Ariana. Good morning to all of you. I want to see everybody. I am sorry, I'm out of it. We flew from DC last night after 8 hours flying, so it's like trying to collect your thoughts. So we discussed with our board last week and informed them that we will be coming to them next week, next Friday, to ask for an action to delay our regional transportation plan for at least 2 years. We also discussed with them, and I want you to know that this decision carries significant risks to the region, to the agency, and we're going to try to minimize those risks by running legislation and working with our partners at the state and federal level to meet the requirement without any penalties. One of the reasons we're delaying the plan is our plan by federal and state laws have to meet an emission test on the federal side, which we meet, but the greenhouse gas emission test at the state level. We have to achieve 19% per capita greenhouse gas emissions in 2035. Unfortunately, we got to 18%. That last 1% is elusive. And we obviously, as your team, want to do better than just meet the 19%. So given that we didn't get there, we are going to cease to work on this part and develop our vision, put it forth, and come to the board in the next few months and discuss with them some ideas we think is going to get us there, but not only get us there, ideas that will make our region have transportation system. Now, some of the board members ask what are the risks. The risks are losing opportunity to get funding, opportunity to move the schedule. We have some significant project now, like the mid-course. This guy Jim here is doing. We would hope that these risks don't materialize, but nevertheless there is a risk. I believe this is, as far as the staff, the team here, it's a calculated risk. We're going to do our best. We were in Sacramento last week. We spoke to the chair of Senate Transportation, Senator Bill, the chair of Assembly, Assembly Member Frazier. We spoke to the head of the Air Resources Board, Richard Corey. We spoke to the director of housing, Ben Metcalf, to let them know that this is what we're doing. It's important to know that we are divorcing the plan from the regional housing need assessment. We are going to move forward with the housing regional need assessment because we want to minimize the risk to our cities and to the county when it comes to housing units. So we are only delaying the regional transportation plan, the sustainable community strategy. Again, this was an information to the board. It will be going for an action next Friday. And I wanted you to know that this is happening. We did send correspondence to our stakeholders, informing them of this. We want to work with all the stakeholders, formulate the new transportation plan, and I think you'll all be pleased with some of the ideas that our teams are putting on the table for the new plan. So with that, I'll stop. I'll be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
How about the rest of the agencies in the state of California? Is anybody else having this problem?
Yeah, pretty much every major MPO, the three big ones, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Los Angeles, have very similar problems. Also, what makes it hard for us, we are first. We are first, so we have to make a decision. We are meeting, Kim and I are meeting with our colleagues. We meet regularly, but we are meeting in that regard very shortly. We did inform them, and CalCag, the agency that represents all of them, that this is happening. But we are in the same boat. The issue is the Air Resources Board wants to see real things in these plans. They believe very strongly that since 2008, since the first plan we submitted, that we have not been doing things to move toward reducing vehicle travel, changing land uses. And they believe, not only us, but all the MPOs, that it's all about planning exercise, not a real thing. And we're going to prove them wrong by putting forth the vision that we think it's more than just planning exercise. But yeah, all the other MPOs are probably in the same boat, but we are fairest, so we have to make that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes my report.
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
You reference risks and potential risks for funding. Is there any particular funding for particular projects that you can identify at this point that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is a whole category of funding: cap and trade, SB1. They're all linked to regions having an approved regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy. Now, we're going to go until the state make our 2015 plan and sustainable community strategy active until we give you a new one. If we're successful, that minimizes some of the risk. But also there's a legal risk. Anybody could come and sue the agency saying, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. There is a risk of some of our cities or partners who are moving forward with their project, somebody's suing them and saying you're not consistent with the regional transportation plan. So these are kind of, I can't tell you right now the specific project, but there is a significant amount of money on the table if we don't get that legislative relief. Good question. Yes, sir.
Are any existing projects in jeopardy or at risk?
I mean, I mentioned I wouldn't be able to identify one now, but I mentioned that, you know, this could lead to some delays in some projects. I hope it doesn't. I hope the mid-coast doesn't get impacted, which is a major project. Hope the other project doesn't. But we wouldn't know until we actually get. And by the way, we're not in that period yet. We were supposed to submit a plan in November 2020, right?
November
2019. So once we reach November, after November, we'll be able to do. But I hope not. I hope, you know, and by the way, our team has communicated with the federal agencies, Federal Highways and Caltrans last week. And I think we have a path forward with the federal government. It's the state government that probably carries a higher risk.
So maybe I don't understand. So if you've got a project that, like the Mid-Coast, which is, I mean, open heart surgery,
Right.
you're saying you might just close it up without fixing some of the arteries here. How can you, I mean, how does that, I mean, you can't, how do you not finish a project?
I don't wanna say be negative and scare people. It could. If the federal government doesn't accept our approach to the plan, they could come and says, you're not gonna get your allocation for next year. We're gonna delay you until you get the plan. It doesn't mean we're gonna lose the funding. We're probably gonna have delay of project. It could. I'm very reluctant to make you feel good and tell you everything is hanky-dory. It's not. It's a risk, and a calculated risk, and we're gonna have to take that risk. We really have no choice. But you're right. It could.
But is the standard, it sounds like it's the state standard that is the progressive standard.
It is.
And the federal government's, what's the federal government's percentage, or do they even have one?
On average, we get about 14–15%, but they are important. I mean, look, the Mid-Coast, we get $100 million a year for 10 years. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, no.
Even though percentage-wise it might be small, but it's important. I will tell you this. So, I think we will have a good path with the federal agency. The federal agency pretty much said, just submit a technical correction to your plan and see if you meet the requirement. I think we will. It's the state the state requirement that could be worrisome, and it's also a third party coming and suing. You know, in this state, everybody loves to sue everybody. So, yes, sir.
And on the other side of the equation, what's the risk of getting to the deadline and not having met the requirement? Because presumably, that's a fairly onerous.
Yeah, I can guarantee you that we will meet the requirement. There is no scenario where we're gonna get to a point where we're not meeting our requirement as a metropolitan planning organization or a regional transportation agency. The question is the time and how long it's going to take us to get there. And also the question is the commitment of the board of this agency and the people of this region that are really willing to invest in the future. So our new plan is not going to be cheap. And you and I know we don't print money, right? We're going to have to get the money somewhere. But that's a different discussion. Let's define the vision, get there. But there is no scenario. I say we will not be doing our jobs as your team if we get you to a scenario where there is no plan. There will be a plan, and a plan that meets the requirement and that we will be proud of. Yes, sir.
Is this plan of, I think, 19%? Is this a moving bar?
No, it's still 19%.
Will that end it?
It's right now, the way it stands, it's 19% per capita reduction by 2035.
Right.
That will still be the same. I think your question is an important one. Is meeting 19% today as easy or as difficult as meeting it in 2 years from now? That depends on a lot of things, the tools and the assumptions and the effectiveness. I believe the biggest component of meeting the 19% is gonna be, can we put a system in front of our people that will change their desire to drive so much? Right now, 97% of us drive. That's the only choice we have.
But will this bar change to 25%?
No. Well, actually, they started, they wanted 25%, and we fought hard as an excuse to make it 19.
Yes.
No, but it's not gonna change. That's the state requirement, the AB 32 requirement. It says that that part of the requirement is gonna be 25% statewide. So we negotiated with them 19% with the understanding that the state will figure out a way to get the 6%. But no, that's not gonna change.
All right, thank you.
Not for now, at least.
Not for now.
Predictable.
And you just heard yesterday the governor's speech about high-speed rail. Of course, after the governor's speech, every agency tried to clarify what the governor really meant, right? It looks like high-speed rail is going to be Merced to Bakersfield and money to the south, money to the north. No San Diego to San Francisco or Los Angeles to San Francisco. When we were in Sacramento, we knew that, and we're preparing actually, we could be a beneficiary of that because we have a great need in the Los Angeles corridor to add capacity and to make it. So this is a changing world when it comes to transportation. But we'll keep you informed. Right. Yes, sir.
And from a governance perspective, is this a simple majority vote of the board or something of this magnitude of
Say that again,
two-thirds?
sir?
Is the board approval required only a simple majority of
Yeah.
the board?
Yeah. The board, I think, I'm expecting the board to be together. I mean, I don't count votes and I don't guess votes, but this is, I think the board believes that this region deserves a system that gets us to be less dependent on the car, provide good transportation system. And I underline transportation system because we need all the components of the system. So I expect our board to move it, whether it's going to be unanimous or some votes, I don't know.
Do this have any impacts on like our TIPIA loan or anything? Is there any kind of requirements between our borrowings that we have to meet
Well,
this plan?
look, I think the question came before. If we didn't go and put a legislation forth, or we didn't talk to the federal agency, it happened in Atlanta, where the region didn't meet the requirement. In that case, they have 1 year grace period, then the federal government takes over and start doing the planning for the region. A lot of things could happen, but I believe, and again, I'm trying not to tell our board to make them feel good, there is risk, but I think our job is to make sure we minimize it and eliminate those risks. There is all these kind of risks, that somebody could say you couldn't apply for TIFIA because you didn't have an approved plan. But if the federal agencies ahead of time said we will accept your technical amendment to the plan and we submit it and we get the stamp of approval, that minimizes the risk. But there is all kinds of risks if we just simply don't have a plan. And there is some precedent in the country. Houston, Atlanta, they couldn't get a plan to meet the requirement, and they had some penalties to pay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we're on item number 8. This is Ariana.
That's right. I have an update for you since your last meeting in January. You'll recall you saw the First Amendment to the 2018 RTIP at that meeting, and the board approved that in January. You may recall your performance audit called for SANDC to consider establishing a performance framework to better measure performance against ordinance goals. And you're going to hear an update on that at your next meeting, where we'll provide the usual update on implementation of those audit recommendations. But towards that effort, the board did approve 2019 safety targets consistent with FAST Act requirements at its meeting last month as well. And then you may also recall staff presented the regional monitoring report at your meeting in January. And that presents a set of indicators in which direction each is moving in, and the board adopted that report in January as well. Related to the RTCIP development impact under the Transnet Extension Ordinance, you heard a report at your last meeting regarding board policy amendments related to that, regarding accessory dwelling unit exemptions, and the board policy amendment to clarify existing exemptions for ADUs. That was approved by the board in January as well. The board established an airport development subcommittee. There was some discussion at your last meeting. ITAC raised some questions, and they approved a budget amendment to supplement existing staff capacity to meet the deadline for developing draft concepts for consideration this spring. Last week, the board was provided with an update on the progress being made on the regional plan. Today you heard from Hassan an update on that, and going forward there's going to be a standing item on all agendas going forward so that we can keep you up to date on progress regarding that effort. You'll recall at your last meeting, proposed fare ordinance changes were presented, and the ITAC had asked, based on public input at that meeting, that staff reach out to NCTD regarding whether the proposed increase to lift pass could be scaled back. And NCTD's board approved that change proposed by ITAC, and SANDAG board approved the amendments to the fare ordinance and the Transnet Extension Ordinance at its meeting last month as well to simplify those transit fares. And then finally, you'll recall SANDAG has been working to hire an independent performance auditor, and the board approved an employment agreement with Mary Koshmashrab, I believe is the last name, how you pronounce that, for the position of independent performance auditor. The audit committee, which Mr. Halpern sits on, initiated that recruitment for this new position last fall and had recommended two finalists to the board in early January, and this individual will begin work in April. Will be SANDAG's first performance auditor for the agency. That's it.
Just for clarification, so at our last meeting, we had the gentleman make, I thought a compelling, I think we all thought made a compelling case with regard to the fare structure. So you're saying that, in fact, they modified the fare increase? Do you know what it ended up as?
I believe it was, I think it was at 5, and it was proposed to be raised to $7.50, and it remained at 5.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
So the airport committee, subcommittee, is that associated with the new transit hub? I think I saw some news reporting that the airport authority was going to be doing that.
Yes, I believe.
Right, so the subcommittee is looking at the connection to the airport, so it includes that as well.
That'd be great. Cool. Great. Thank you, Ariana. Item number 9, City of San Diego. And I'm not going to go through all the names. Just introduce yourselves, that'd be appreciated.
So the PowerPoint is behind you. You could put there, or you could
Good morning. Thank you, committee. I'm Gene Matter with the City of San Diego's Transportation Stormwater Department. I'm the assistant director, and with me is Ben Battaglia. He's the department's financial program manager. I'd also like to acknowledge in our audience Myrna Dayton. She's the assistant director for the city's engineering department and the chief deputy city engineer. Also, we have Karen McGriff. She's our financial operations manager with the Department of Finance. Kevin Perez is a supervising management analyst with the department. We have Aubrey Cohen over there. She's a senior management analyst with the department as well. So Our presentation is going to be twofold. Ben is going to provide an update on our fund balance, a look at the city's transportation portion of our CIP program, and how the city is leveraging this funding to provide transportation-related services. And I'm going to wrap it up with information about some large projects of interest. I'm going to hand it over to Ben at this time.
Okay, so the City of San Diego receives approximately 38% of the total Transnet local streets and roads revenue. We've implemented cash management strategies over the last few years, and the city has made significant progress in spending down our Transnet cash on priority projects, as you can see by this table here. This is a snapshot of the current fiscal year's projection and also the prior 3 fiscal years' activity. Since fiscal year 2016, the city's decreased its balance at Sandag by approximately $23 million. And we also project to decrease the remaining balance by an additional $5 million by the end of this fiscal year. This pie chart here shows the different funding sources that supported the department's fiscal year 2018 CIP program. The allocations are also very similar to the fiscal year 2019 budget. Transnet is shown in the dark blue slice at the bottom. It's made up about $74 million, or 13% of our program. The total CIP budget for our department is about $557 million. So we have many different types of funding sources that support our program. A big chunk of it is grants. An even larger chunk is financing, debt financing. We have developer funds, gas tax, including SB1. We have the general fund, our underground surcharge fund, and of course DIF and FBA. So Transnet is an important funding source for the city, and it's often used to leverage other funds. Specifically for our street maintenance program, Transnet is used in conjunction with SB1 funding, gas tax funding, and also debt financing. We often leverage Transnet as a match for federal and state grants as well. Currently, we manage about 25 grants for the transportation CIPs, and it equates to about $135 million. A few of the larger projects that we've received grants for are the SR 163 Friars Road Interchange project. We've received federal repurposing dollars of about $1 million there. Or the Georgia Street Bridge project, we received about $11 million of federal highway bridge program funding. And also the Otay truck route. We received SB1 funding for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program of about $6 million. So looking back at fiscal year 2018, our Transnet projections were approximately $35 million, and actual expenditures were about $34 million. The $1.5 million difference was primarily a result of street resurfacing projects expending more lease revenue bonds than anticipated at the beginning of the year in order to spend down the funds by the IRS deadlines. So again, looking back at FY18, these are some of our major projects. So resurfacing of city streets, we had projected about $4 million to be expended. About $300,000 was expended for the reason that I stated previously. For the old Otay Mesa Road project, we projected about $3.5 million, and we spent close to that, $3.3 million, with an additional $1 million encumbered. The SR 163 Friars Road project, we originally projected to spend $2 million of Transnet. We actually spent $6 million. And the reason for this is that we maximize the Transnet expenditures in the project, which means that we spent the Transnet funds before all other funds in the project. And then finally, the State Route 94 Euclid Avenue Interchange project. We had originally projected $2 million, spent a little over $100,000, but we did have about $2.5 million encumbered. And the reason for not spending the full amount of projection was that there was a slight delay in the start of construction. So through the first half of fiscal year 19, our CIP expenditures totaled about $12 million, and over $7 million was encumbered in projects. We're also on track to fully expend our maintenance, administration, and project implementation budgets by the end of the fiscal year. So this is a list of some of our major planned expenditures for the current fiscal year. We plan to expend about $8 million for resurfacing the city streets. This is particularly for overlay. We have a plan this year in the city to pave about 390 miles of streets between slurry seal and overlay. Also, State Route 163 Friars Road, we expect to expend about $3.5 million on the construction phase. State Route 94 Euclid Avenue Interchange, about $2.5 million for construction. For the old Otay Mesa Road Westerly project, we expect to expend about $2.5 million for construction. And then finally for traffic signals, and this is for new traffic signals, modifications, and also the interconnect system. We expect to expend about $2 million for construction. So we continue to fund by phase, and also when expenditures are anticipated to occur. We never want cash just to sit in projects. So in addition to these major projects, we have many other smaller congestion relief projects that will be expending funds in the current fiscal year. A list of all these active Transnet funded projects has been provided to you, and then we have a list of about 160 Transnet funded projects. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll turn it back over to Gene.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to
Over to Gene.
just highlight approximately 5 projects that are of a lot of interest typically. So as Ben reported earlier, the city has invested nearly $100 million in street maintenance throughout the city. This equates to over 1,000 miles in the last 4 years, and last year, FY18 was our largest in the city's history. Resurfacing is an important function to improve a street's condition, which in turn makes it safer for vehicles, pedestrians, as well as bicyclists. It also gives us an opportunity to evaluate the roadway for additional uses. For example, in the same time period, we actually repurposed and resurfaced 140 miles. What that means is we've changed the bike use, so we've installed typically Class 2 bike facilities on those streets after we resurfaced them. So an example of one of the streets is the one here on Rancho Carmel Drive. It's one of nearly 1,000 street segments a year that we pave and we change from a deteriorated condition to smooth, pothole-free surface. And all this work is being noticed by our and appreciated by the public. We recently got an email from a constituent where she wrote, "I want to thank you for getting our street paved. What a pleasure it was to come floating down our nice, new, smooth street." And she emphasized the word smooth in her email. So the next project is Old Otay Mesa Road. So in addition to improving pavement condition throughout the city, Transnet funding was used to expand or replace existing transportation assets. Old Otay Mesa Road is a capital improvement project to expand an existing roadway to provide safer mobility for bicyclists and pedestrians. The path is an integral link between residential neighborhoods, a high school, and a middle school. The project will install 5,000 feet of sidewalk where there was no sidewalk before, and a Class 2 bike facility with buffers on both sides. Other elements of the project include road widening, storm drains, street lights, and revegetation of a disturbed area. The project is about 95% complete and should be done in the spring of 2019, so it's coming up. Another project is the SR 94 Euclid Interchange. This location is a cooperative project with Caltrans to improve the intersection ramps with Highway 94 and Euclid Avenue. The project will improve safety for all, as it's currently an uncontrolled intersection with a higher than average accident rate. It will realign both ramps to provide better pedestrian and bicycle crossing. Also, the project will provide signal control, audible pedestrian signals, ADA improvements, and will also provide Class 2 bike facilities on Euclid Avenue near the freeway. The project is about 40% complete and is scheduled for completion in late spring 2019. Another project is 163 Friars Road. So in the heart of Mission Valley is an ongoing project that will provide increased mobility for residents and patrons in the area. The project includes widening the State Route 163 Friars Road overcrossing from 3 lanes to 4 lanes in each direction, improvements to the on and off ramps, modifications to the signalized intersections, and widening along Frazee Road. This phase will construct a southbound SR 163 auxiliary lane. Improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians in this phase include providing a bike lane and sidewalk on both eastbound and westbound Friars Road. The project is currently under construction and is estimated to be completed in the winter of 2020. So my last project is the West Mission Bay Drive Bridge. So as we all know, our coastline and beaches are our most valued natural resource enjoyed by our residents and tourists alike. The project will replace the West Mission Bay Bridge that was built 70 years ago in 1950. Its replacement will be a modern facility that includes multimodal access to connect our southern and northern coastlines. The new facility will be 2 3-lane bridges that will include sidewalk, bike lane, and shoulder improvements. Now, I've been told this is the largest single transportation improvement the city has ever embarked on. Construction began recently. It's about 15% complete, and we hope to have grand opening winter of 2022. So the city has implemented several process improvements to maximize the official use of our CIP funding. There is extensive cross-coordination between all internal departments that constantly evaluate when projects need funding. This has significantly reduced instances which funding is underutilized in projects or projects get delayed moving into construction for lack of funding. Also, with our rollout of our citywide enterprise asset management system, we are planning and will be implementing a holistic approach to public improvements. What this means is we are aligning all the needs of each asset in the street. So for example, if a street needs new storm drains, water, sewer, and is in really bad condition, it will be a higher priority than other streets where not all the assets need to be replaced. So the end result will be a well-planned approach to asset management throughout the city. That concludes our presentation. Ben, Myrna, and I and the rest of the team are here to answer any questions you have.
I know you have a question. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I only have one quick question, but first quick comment. I've been on this committee for almost 8 years, and the improvement in the quality of your management of Transnet funds has been remarkable. And I thank you very much for this. My only quick question, and it's a numbers question, you have said that you have resurfaced over 1,000 miles in the last 5 years, which is admirable. Do you know how many miles the city contains completely? 1,000 out of how many miles?
I think it's about a little over 3,000, so we've touched almost a third of our network in the last 4 years.
All right. Well, one of the things that we've pushed for is that all of the member agencies, the cities and counties, have study programs to analyze the condition of their streets, and I think you folks are doing that now. So I'm very happy. I will retire from this committee with a smile on my face.
I actually have to read. First of all, thank you. Thanks for coming. Just a little bit of a follow-up first for the question that I thought Jonathan was likely to ask. Of the amount that you have done in the resurfacing, if money and manpower were no object, how much is targeted to get resurfaced? In other words, how much more do you envision needing to get done over what kind of a time period?
So our primary goal is to maintain an average OCI of 70 for the entire street network. And in order to do that, we need to ramp up to about 430 miles per year. That's between the slurry seal maintenance and overlay reconstruction. So we're ramping up to that. We're about 390 now and ramping up to 430, and we should be staying constant at 430 to maintain that average OCI of 70.
Gotcha, okay. Second question I had is when you were talking about traffic signals, there was a reference to interconnect, if I'm right. So is that a kind of like a smart signal kind of system, or does that interconnect mean something else that I'm?
Yeah, no, what it is it analyzes a large corridor. For example, we're wrapping up Mesa Boulevard right now, and it interconnects all the traffic signals and adjusts the timing for smooth progression through the corridor for motorists.
Got it, okay. I just wasn't familiar with that term. So there's a citywide program to try to proliferate smart signals throughout the city?
Yes, we have a team of traffic engineers, and the goal is to do about 10 a year. So far, we've been on track with that. It's to really analyze 10 different locations a year and signal or upgrade, enhance the timing of the signalization of that corridor.
Cool. Is there any way to, just even in a ballpark sense, speak to the percentage of the intended complete system as to where you are in that process?
Well, the idea is to study each major corridor about every 10 years. So with the goal of 10 a year, it sounds like we've identified 100 major corridors. And that's just on a cyclical basis. Every 10 years, we might go back and reanalyze because conditions change on a corridor.
Good, okay. And then the last question I had, and I may be wrong in this, but I have a vague recollection from prior presentations from the City of San Diego that is there a certain balance of funds that you just kind of keep as available but not targeted to be spent, kind of like a cushion of funds? I have some vague recollection that in the past somebody referenced 20-something million that you just purposefully don't plan on spending in a year, that you kind of keep in the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, we do want to keep some level of cash balance, of course, at all times. And our goal is to get to about 50% of our annual allocation, so about $15 to $16 million is our goal. And we have a 3-year goal to reach that. So this is year 1. So by the end of this fiscal year, 1920, so by the end of FY21, we hope to achieve that goal.
So maybe then refresh our memories, or maybe we never discussed the rationale for keeping a fairly sizable amount of money in the bank, so to speak, as opposed to perhaps taking the approach that, well, we could spend that down because we know if in a pinch we can probably access the Sandag commercial paper program for a short-term funding need.
Yeah. So a couple things. So we want to make sure that we have enough cash to support our current encumbrances, and we have between $10 and $15 million of encumbrances at any given time. So we always want to make sure that we have enough cash in case those payments are due. So that's the primary reason. And then you had mentioned the Transnet commercial paper program. We do have authorization up to $40 million of utilization, but it's specific for one project. It's the West Mission Bay Drive Bridge. And we will be utilizing most likely that full amount for that particular project within the next 1 to 2 years.
Gotcha. And that specific targeting, is that a city decision, or does that somehow relate to the requirements for cities to access the commercial paper program?
The cushion, the 15 to 16 cushion to
No.
access?
The 40 million of that in the commercial paper program authorization, is that a city decision, or is there somehow a Sandag condition that accessing the commercial paper program can only be for certain projects?
It is a Sandag decision. The city did request a certain amount of funding, and $40 million, up to $40 million revolving was decided. And I know that there is, I understand there is some additional capacity in that program, if in case we did need to request some more. I know that there is a small amount of additional capacity.
Got it, okay. All right, maybe some other time we could talk to Andre a little bit more about to just better understand the ability of cities to access that program, but thank you.
I had a question to follow up on Stuart's, the interconnect. In instances where your signals are either in a different jurisdiction, how closely do you work with those other jurisdictions to ensure a free flow or as good a flow of traffic as you can?
Boy, that's getting on the operations side that I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
I'll have to find out and get back to you.
And then on your last listing of funded projects, thank you for this. There's no title for the last page, it just gives, the other ones I can tell it's a storm drain or a median or street resurfacing. And I know El Camino Real is planned to be widened and shifted east. Is this for that whole project, or is this just a component of this? I'm looking specifically at SD 34. Second one on.
Yes. Yeah, so these are the individual standalone projects.
Okay.
So the pages before are what we call annual allocations, and we have sub-projects budgeted within those annual allocations. So the last page that you have is larger standalone projects. So for El Camino Real, that project is to widen the bridge at El Camino Real. And it's currently in the design phase right now and should be going to construction within the next couple of years. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I kind of assumed that was, that clarifies. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Is
it.
this annual presentation still helpful, something you'd like to
Well,
continue seeing every
Jonathan's
year?
happy, so I don't think he can. No, I think it's very helpful, and if you guys don't mind, I would appreciate having it, especially the percentage of funds that get diverted to you. It's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Now onto my favorite topic, EMP. The Kim and Keith. I saw Sarah. So
Good morning.
there's Sarah. She's just here.
It's the fun part of this presentation ahead of time. All right.
Okay, you ready? Okay, good morning. As Dustin said, my name is Kim Smith, and I'm the program manager for the Environmental Mitigation Program here at Sandag. And today, we will be presenting item number 10 on your agenda, which consists of two parts. The first will be the annual status update of provision of the Transnet extension ordinance known as the Environmental Mitigation Program. And second is the new Memorandum of Agreement, which will implement the next 10 years of the EMP program. So just as a reminder, the Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program provides funding to mitigate habitat impacts from regional and local transportation projects and funding for regional land management and biological monitoring. It does this by acquiring and managing large tracts of land with native habitat early in advance of transportation projects needing mitigation, thereby reducing cost, accelerating delivery of our transportation infrastructure, implementing habitat plans, and reducing the listing of threatened and endangered species. So two funds were originally established under the EMP. First is the Transportation Project Mitigation Fund, and this fund provides for the proactive acquisition, restoration, and management of mitigation for regional transportation projects included in the Regional Transportation Plan and for local streets and roads. And second, the Regional Habitat Conservation Fund, which was established to maintain the existing habitat quality of the regional preserve system to reduce further degradation of these lands through enhanced regional land management and monitoring. So first, I'd like to address the Transportation Mitigation Fund and some of the accomplishments to date. So to date, we've acquired 40 properties that total over 8,780 acres of land. You might be wondering how big is 8,780 acres? Well, it's 7 times the size of Balboa Park, and it's larger than the city of Solana Beach and Mission Bay Park combined. Attachment 1, pages 77 to 79 of your report and on your tablets also gives you an idea of how much land we've conserved to date. The photo shown above, bottom right, depicts one of our key acquisitions in 2018, Deer Canyon East, and it was 111 acres of undeveloped land that was acquired for mitigation for our regional transportation projects. And this was an important purchase because it was the last in-holding of land needed to complete the City of San Diego's Del Mar Mesa Preserve. In addition, over 800 acres of land is currently being restored to native habitats that include wetlands, coastal sage scrub, and vernal pools. That's a total investment of $160 million. This approach of large-scale acquisition has allowed us to partner with local, state, and federal agencies to attract $41 million of non-Transnet funding that help build out our regional preserve system. 2018 was also a big year of accomplishments for our coastal lagoon projects, which are mitigation for our larger I-5 North Coast Corridor project, which includes improvements to both the rail and the highway. In January of 2018, the San Elijo restoration project kicked off. The goal of this restoration project is to restore and improve the ecological function of the lagoon by improving tidal circulation, water quality, and habitat for the endangered ridgeways rail shown above. And then in November of this year, the final EIR for the San Diego W19 restoration project was certified. And this is allowing staff to move into the permitting and design phase, and the anticipated start of construction for this project is fall of 2020. So now we're moving to the Regional Habitat Conservation Fund. The Sandag Board of Directors approved an MOA that allocates $4 million a year for 10 years to assist in filling the gaps in management and monitoring of our regional preserve system, thus avoiding listing of new species as endangered and protecting our current investments. Funding in the past has been used for habitat recovery from wildfires, invasive species management, wildlife connectivity, partnering to promote endangered species recovery, habitat restoration, and land management grants. Highlights in 2018 include for plants, we continue to work with land managers to monitor for rare plants to fill in the gaps of where they exist within the preserve system. 83% of the rare plant occurrences are now currently being monitored. USGS completed the genetic analysis of 6 of these rare plants to gain a better understanding of species occurrence, diversity, and connectivity on open space lands. Now the San Diego Zoo is using the results from this genetic work to help establish seed banks for these rare species. And then they're using these bank seeds and partnering with land managers across the county to help restore wild populations. We continue to work with UC Davis to study mountain lion behavior and determine barriers to their movement throughout the region. The video playing above is the first episode of an 8-part series of short documentaries developed to highlight the conservation issues for this species. And finally, telemetry research on golden eagles is being used to develop habitat selection models related to land use and terrain. This is helping to understand how eagles are moving within our regional preserve system and how we can improve conservation efforts in the future for the species. Attachment 1, pages 77 to 79 of your report, highlights additional accomplishments in 2018 for regional land management and monitoring. So the Land Management Grant Program is also a key component of the Regional Habitat Conservation Fund. To date, there have been 9 grant cycles that have awarded a total of 117 grants through a competitive process. Approximately $16.6 million in funding has been awarded, and an additional $10 million of matching funding has been provided by grantees. The location of those projects are shown above on the map depicting the distribution within the San Diego region. Since we are speaking about the EMP Land Management Grant Program today, we also wanted to follow up on some discussion that came up at the September ITALC meeting. During the quarterly grant report that was being presented there were some questions about how the EMP Land Management Grant Program can help address the region's priority needs and how priority needs were being tracked over time. So I wanted to take this opportunity to remind folks that of the management strategic plan shown above. This plan contains specific goals and objectives for animals and plants in the San Diego region. By funding projects that address these goals and objectives, the EMP Land Management Grant Program can help ensure that funding is being allocated to meet high priority regional needs. In addition, when a call for projects is prepared, staff at the San Diego Management and Monitoring Program, which is funded through Sandag, prepare a list of priority goals and objectives for different species to try to encourage grantees to propose projects that address one or more of those goals and objectives. Projects that address high priority needs are also awarded more points when proposals are viewed. In addition, our partners at SDMMP are working to track which goals and objectives are being implemented by land management grant projects and also other projects in the region. It is important to note, though, that just because one project in the region has been funded that addresses a certain goal or objective, that goal or objective isn't necessarily met. Many of these regional needs will take years to address and will require multiple funding sources and collaboration between multiple organizations and agencies. So what is next for the EMP program? Over the next 10 years, staff will begin working on the recommendations that came out of the 2018 Transnet 10-year review look back and the triennial performance audits. Recommendations include establishing a new memorandum of agreement with Caltrans, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The existing MOA expired in early February of 2018, and staff has been working with the signatories and the EMP working group to bring forward a recommendation for approval of a new MOA, and that will be the second part of this presentation today. Review and update of the financial estimates and use of EMP funds. Based on the results of the last 10 years, projects and costs are still on track. Staff will continue to project out and review what has been spent and determine any cost savings in the future. Increase the marketing efforts for the EMP local streets and roads mitigation banks, and develop simple metrics to measure the overall health of our preserve system and report these results to the public. Staff will also continue to provide quarterly updates on land management grants to the committees and the board of directors. So I will now turn my presentation over to Keith Greer to discuss implementation of the new MOA. Implementation of the new.
All right, good morning. And this is one of my favorite topics. So of course, this is important. All right, before I get into the background, I just want to mention your last item. The city of San Diego was addressing you with some of their construction projects. And I had to just indicate that there was at least 2 projects there that this environmental mitigation program helped to facilitate by buying land in advance of construction. So Friars Road Bridge 163, we had bought land 3 years before they were even ready to go out for bid. And we had their mitigation all locked up and tied up for them when they were ready. And then you mentioned El Camino Real bridge widening. We actually already have a designated mitigation for that project, which the EMP local streets and roads funds will be paying for. So again, showing how the ordinance is being implemented and working with our local jurisdictions. So thank you, Kim. So item 10 before you is a recommendation in the San Diego Board of Directors to approve a memorandum of agreement to implement the EMP program for another 10 years. So those of you like Jonathan have been around for a while, you kind of have seen me before. Every year I come talk to you about the status report. But for background, what is the EMP, what is the MOA and what does it do? So back in 2005, when the Environmental Mitigation Program was adopted and a working group established, the first thing they said is we kind of need operating. How does the wildlife agencies, which control the permits, work with Caltrans and Sandag in terms of building out our projects? And so it was really clear that we needed some kind of governance document or structure. Back and forth, we went on all kinds of different scenarios and we landed on this MOA. So this memorandum of agreement is signed by Sandag and Caltrans and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So they're known as the signatures. So it's been 10 years now. We've implemented the MOA. It's actually been an award-winning project. We've actually been used as a state model and a national model. And Caltrans has right currently now a program at the state level for advanced mitigation. So Kim's showing you all the great things and all the pretty pictures, and I can't do the mountain lion pictures on this. But let me give you a real practical example of how the EMP helps promote our projects and why this MOA is so powerful to me. So this is for Jim in the background there. This is the Midcoast project. So the Midcoast is our highlight project, one of our key projects for the region. We did all the environmental clearance, and at the 11th hour, literally when we were going out for construction bidding, they found this endangered species, this fairy shrimp, in a rut next to the alignment. Now, okay, there's endangered species there. What does this mean? Well, this was a newspaper article that came out. Basically, it said this little fairy shrimp was going to delay the project for a year, and it was going to cost millions of dollars to fix a $2 billion project to delay to more and cost us lots of money. But what the article didn't know is that way before this, in 2008, we'd already thought about this occurring, and we bought land ahead of time. We bought land down in Otay, Mesa that could be restored. So by the time the article came out, we'd already talked to the agencies. They already approved the mitigation land that we've already bought. And we got written or verbal concurrence there, written concurrence on a week later. So not a year, 1 week. And that's the power of the EMP. We had foresight and the ability to buy land ahead of time, and it cost us no delay and cost us no additional money for this 11th hour fine that we had. And so that's what this memorandum agreement is attempting to do. Create the structure so that we can do these projects and not cause any delays or any kind of cost increases. So moving forward, you all talked about the 10-year look back. You've talked about the triennial performance audits. And coming out of that, one of the biggest things that your auditors had indicated was the environmental mitigation program was very helpful in advancing our early action projects. So like an example on the Mid-Coast or like 163 Friars Road, the EMP was helping to advance those projects by buying land early at a lower cost and having that secured for these projects as they went forward. So it's not shocking. The auditors said, well, what you need to do is, as this MOU expires, you know, we've looked back 10 years now. We had that pilot program for 10 years. We propose you continue to have an MOA. So that's what's in front of you today, is the updated MOA. So you're saying, okay, well, what's in this updated MOA? And I'm going to say, well, okay, I'm going to point you to your attachment 1, page 82 of your tablets. And what we did is we worked with the existing MOA and we worked with signatures to say, what have we learned over the last 10 years? What can we clarify? What can we update? What lessons have we learned? What best practices can we incorporate? So what you see in front of you in red text is all the changes that are being made to the MOA. They're not dramatic changes. The MOA is working pretty well. We've clarified it in many areas. And so let me address the key changes for you so you understand what the MOA is actually proposing. So the first key change is, it's not a big one, it's saying let's do the MOA for another 10 years. Why 10 years? Well, it corresponds with the next comprehensive audit. So I talked 10-year annual comprehensive review. We're just going to tie right back into that. So we did the first 10 years, we did an evaluation of the program. We're proposing another 10 years with another evaluation at that 10-year mark. The second component is that we want to continue funding for the Habitat Conservation Fund. Those are all the pretty pictures of the birds and bunnies for land management and monitoring. But they do more than just monitor and manage. They actually help us keep from species becoming listed. And for those of you in the industry, you know that when a species becomes listed, it becomes exceedingly hard to actually get projects constructed. So since the ENP program has been in effect, no species has been listed. And a large part of that is because we've had the foresight and proactiveness to actually start putting money towards making sure species don't become listed. So we can continue this funding at the same level of service as the last 10 years, managing our cash flow, and no need for additional bonding. So we've already worked with Jose and his group and put it in the plan of finance, and it doesn't explode the model, and we can continue doing that. My words, Jose, not yours. We also incorporated any of the board actions that they've taken over the last 10 years into the MOA, and we can put them as attachments or just as text into the MOA itself. This way you can go to one spot. You don't have to go to multiple spots for what the board's actions have been. And finally, we've updated the timing and release of economic benefit. Economic benefit is a kind of a strange term in the ordinance, but we've clarified that there is no additional funding for economic benefit. It won't be considered until after the repayment of bonds that were taken out during the first 10 years. So just like other Transnet programs, the ENP bonded during the first 10 years, and now we're in a repayment component of it. So besides the $4 million per year for the land management, we are living within our means as we go as a pay-as-you-go type program under the ENP. So they're not dramatic changes, but they're moving us forward. And again, the establishment of this MOA fulfills the ITOC, Independent Taxpayers Oversight Auditor's recommendations. This went to the Regional Planning Committee on February 1st, and it was approved unanimously. And our recommendation to you is that the ITOC is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program, MOA, and authorize the Executive Director to sign on behalf of the agency in substantially the same form as Attachment 1. So that concludes my portion of the report, and if you have questions for Kim and I, I'd be happy to address them.
See if anybody, I make some comments.
Do you have any comments?
I've been fortunate enough to Keith and Kim keep me in the loop on the MOA, seen drafts as they come through, and I think it's great. I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to work with different federal and state agencies to get something approved. It's not easy, and having an MOA that outlines exactly how things will occur is brilliant. I wish every project could have them. And then going back to Kim's portion, well, I'm fortunate enough to work next to the W19 project. It's right next to the Edison project. When that's done, is that going to be one of the largest wetland restoration areas? I mean, imagine it would be. It's huge.
a good question, and I think probably it is. Balsa Chica is about half the size, so yeah.
And it's really cool to look at. And we're not a partner, but we do have some restoration. The district that I work for has some restoration within that lagoon area, and it's a cool thing. One question I did have, when it comes to different agencies and different requirements for mitigation, how closely can you or do you work with that agency for, I don't know, hierarchy is the right term? Is wetland more important than a certain species? Is a certain species more important than a different species if they're both threatened or endangered? How do you work out the...
Kim's laughing in my ear over here. I'll take that one. So there are at least 5 federal or state agencies that have permitting or some kind of oversight on this. Everything from Coastal Commission to the Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps, Regional Water Project, and so forth. And it's an art form in terms of getting everybody on the same page in terms of mitigation. And it's what probably Kim and I's majority of our time is getting everybody on that same track. A quick answer to your question is, it's a negotiation, it's a back and forth, but the MOA gives us the authority to tap into our federal and state partners and said, hey, listen, you agreed to be our partner in this, and we want you to go deal with this person over here and get them on board. So it creates them as part of the inside making something go forward as opposed to the outside throwing rocks at anything. But that said, every project's different and it's all fun.
Is there any, once you create a bank or a credit there and you've got, projects in the pipeline that in theory will utilize those credits, is there any expiration in theory on the, are they there till you need them indefinitely, or?
They are. We actually have an assigned agreement, a contract with the agencies that say, once we establish a credit, it's good. And
they can't 10 years later say, well, you never used it, so we're just
pull up that contract and say, do you agree with it?
Yeah, okay.
We've never had that problem, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's when you give some examples how you have it sitting there, that's great, but the fear I have with those type of agencies is that the rules change all the time, and you go to use it and they say, oh, well, that was 15 years ago and you never used it, and we're different people and different rules, but that's a good answer. Yeah.
Okay, since the system ain't broke, I suggest that we don't fix it very much any more than you've done. So I move approval that we recommend signature of this extension.
Second. Yeah, I second that, but and I've got some questions that really don't relate to the motion, so we can vote if before they do. Just a bigger picture question. I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding and getting my arms around the program. The $850 million that's referenced in 10A, is that the nominal dollar version of the $650 million sum of costs in attachment B?
So the 850, all is in $2,002, to be clear on that.
Okay, right. I know. Well, I know attachment B specifically says it's 2002, but so the 850 is also 2002. So then, help me square what's the 850 relative to the 650 in attachment B?
Yeah. So 650 is the entire program. So if we didn't do an advanced mitigation program, if we did nothing of this, the estimate was $850 million. That was the estimate, $2,000. But as we went forward with the ordinance, they said an advanced mitigation program could save you $200 million.
Okay, got it. Got it, right. Then the other question I had was $850 million program you've referenced, and I can't remember where it was in the literature, the presentation, that 160 or something has already been spent. Is there any issue in finding land suitable to be spending the money, or can you spend the money as fast as you get it?
No, it's actually...
well, and also you talked about your advancing purchases as well, but help me understand the ability to find relevant land.
Okay. So we've acquired all the relevant uplands that we need.
Okay.
So we've already done that during the recession, saved a lot of money. So now we're actually moving on, I mentioned this, to the restoration of property. And that's the lagoons, W19 that Dustin was talking about is one of those properties. So for the next 10 years, our major focus will be on restoring lands that we've already acquired. And so if that helps you, there's not a big demand right now from the program to buy new land, to secure new land. It's to restore the land that we've already secured.
Got it. Okay. Great, thanks.
Can I follow up on that too? Just the $850 million, you still got, what, 30 years left in the program, basically? And you've spent how much overall?
This is where we go from 2002 to nominal dollars. And so you guys will get this. It's hard for my other stakeholders. So the actual costs are nominal. So the 160, I think, $1 million you're talking about, that's actual, that's real dollars.
Are those the four, now what about the $4 million in grants times 40, right?
But those are also actual dollars.
So going forward, how do you budget, knowing that you have 30 years left in the program? Yearly, how do you justify some of the spending when you know you've got 30 years out?
We work with our great folks in that great plan of finance, and we actually plug the numbers in. And so at the end of the program, it's not $850 million, it's something bigger because of inflation. Well, that's where the plan of finance comes in, and we work on an annual basis and plug in these numbers.
Thank you.
I have a question. So, hearing earlier that they might be changing this plan going forward for our transportation, how does that affect your mitigation land bank? And I assume that's what this is. It's basically a land bank to solve our future mitigation. So is there any correlation, or how is that going to change? Or
that's an excellent question. And until we know what the new set of projects are, we have not been aggressively trying to buy new land. So that's why I said the next 10 years are going to be restoring wetlands, and that's already locked in with our North Coast Corridor projects. But while there may be a desire with some stakeholders to buy a whole bunch of land, we neither have the money because we're paying back the bonds, nor should we be buying land aggressively because projects may change. So I think this next 10 years is going to be one of thoughtful insight of what we need, where we need to spend the money, and holding back on acquiring land just to acquire land.
so everything that you've got today, all the land, sort of takes us through this program we have today that are on books.
Correct, and up to the next 10 years in our estimate. I think we're set for the next 10 years, with the exception we'll be restoring property. If something comes up, then something comes up, but we're in the same boat as we don't want to buy land just to buy land. We want to make it tight to try to do it anyway.
Kim and Hassan have not figured it out yet, so.
But it's been big.
We heard that, we got that. It'll be big, very big. Thank you.
So we have a motion by Jonathan, second by Stuart. Do we have any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion? It's unanimous.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Keith.
Good
Thank
job.
you, Kim. Sarah, thank you for being here. Okay, item number 11. Now, this is the appointment of ITOC committee members to the annual report.
Yep, so that's right. So similar to prior years, we're asking that you appoint no more than 3 voting members, including a project manager from within those 3 members, to this year's annual report subcommittee. And this year, one thing that you'll note in the report is that we hired a copywriting and editing firm to assist staff in putting together your annual report, hoping to tap into this firm's expertise to deliver a better product for this year's report. To that end, we're also looking for any initial thoughts that we can take away at this point so that we can get an early start on a project. And so we're looking for your comments on what you liked about previous year's reports or what you'd like to change so that we can start sharing that. Subcommittee meetings would be happening after every ITOC meeting, similar to how we handled it previously. The first subcommittee meeting would be in February, so once we know the makeup of the subcommittee, then we would schedule that, and it can be a phone conference, it doesn't have to be in person, so we don't have to make folks come down an additional time. And then this is all for presentation to the board and the public in June. And this is the way that you communicate the results of your fiscal audit and your activities from throughout the year and progress on your performance audit as well. So.
And on that note, and seeing that I get to be the presenter, I would like to be on that committee just because I think it helps me get a better grasp and understanding of what I need to present or what the goals.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Brad.
I have no idea what I'm being asked.
So,
Well, I'd be happy to do it again, but if
Yeah.
if you feel like it would be an interesting thing for
It's
you to-
interesting.
just
I
the
mean,
attachment.
interesting.
It's the formation of attachment 1. It's just an annual report, and we just kind of summarize significant things that occurred. Last year we had the 10-year audit. We had the triennial audit. We won't have those again this year, but an example of things that we will report out.
Well, I'm more than happy to. That's how, when Stuart, I don't know if you're going to be around. You're sticking around or not.
Hopefully it'll be around, but as far as
that was
term.
that was a I talk around.
No. No, I mean, I think if you want, I think it's a useful thing for you to get involved in more of these things, so go ahead, yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. So we've got 3, and
Yeah.
do either of you want to be the point?
I did it once. It's been a while, but I'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
No, it's good.
So is this, do we need a formal motion on this?
Do.
Okay, then can I make the motion? So I move that myself, Greg, and Brad become the subcommittee for the 2019 annual report, with Brad being the, what's the term, chair,
Okay.
president, CEO?
No, that'd be useful.
Executive director, there you go.
Pick your title. You have to-
I second the motion.
Good job.
All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Any initial feedback you'd like to provide, just so we can start sharing that? I mean, your subcommittee will also have that opportunity to
Curious
feedback
to
every month. or
meet
so.
with the copywriters, see if they have ideas before.
They'll be at your subcommittee meetings, at least initially, and then we can have that person come to other subcommittees meetings as well, if necessary.
And I know we did some changes last year, and I
Yep.
liked how they came out, so.
Okay.
Are they mostly for graphics and format and, or technical writing also, or what, or both?
All of the above,
Okay.
yeah. We will still be there as staff.
Right.
Irene McCormack, our communications manager, also staffs you in this effort, and our creative services team will put the final product together. But yeah.
Good.
So this actually gets to the next item, but do we actually get charged for that? Because I'm noticing in the budget, there is the 20-something thousand reserve for outside consulting services, so would that be?
So this year, it is actually coming out of our general administration fund because it is our consultant. And so in the future, if you would like to hire your own consultant and use your budget, then we could go through that process. But
Okay, but if we work with,
it's like
for lack of a
support.
better expression, the Sandag person, there's not like an allocation that gets charged out to the committee for their time, or?
Not for their time, but for our time, yes. Which is the next item.
Okay.
We're all good on item 11, correct?
Did we vote?
Yes. Okay. And item number 12, Ariana, this is the 2020 operating budget.
2020 operating budget. So, as you know, Lisa Conrad-Doffin, she comes to your meetings every quarter, presents your quarterly financial report, Within that, you see your ITAC operating budget, and then in addition, we also bring the proposed annual budget to you every February for the ensuing fiscal year. The ITAC budget funds the administration of ITAC activities such as your performance audit, your fiscal audit, the development of your annual report, and related expenses like advertising, there's mileage, consultant services, as was mentioned in the previous item. And this year, you'll also note that salaries and benefits for staff involved in administering ITAC activities are also included. And we've also made an adjustment to this year's, the FY19 current budget, to account for updated fiscal audit expense. So last year, this time, when we put this year's budget together, we were still in negotiations with your fiscal auditor. So we didn't have the exact amount. Now we do, so we've adjusted for that in attachment 1. And regarding staff costs, these previously were funded through the agency's general administration budget, but now we have 10 years worth of data. So we've shown that it's a consistent budget, and this demonstrates that the ITAC revenues can cover the direct staff costs consistent with what the ordinance allows. For example, this would include my time, Susan's time, Jose's time, Julie's time, Lisa's time, Andre's time, staff that is directly involved in ITAC activities. It would not include administrative support such as document processing, putting together the agenda, or the meeting support staff that help put the agenda together. So yes. So with that, the ITAC is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the proposed ITAC operating budget as part of the fiscal year 2020 SAMDAG program budget.
Good, quick question. For the benefit particularly of the new committee member, would you remind us of when fiscal year 20 starts?
Absolutely.
What day?
Yes.
What month?
Yes, it starts July 1, 2019 and ends June 30th, 2020.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned at the very end there was some costs that aren't in this number, they're separated. So where does that money come from?
Also from the general
Okay, so it's
the
just covered.
agencies.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's just not part of our budget.
Correct.
Correct.
So they're just allocating because we haven't been using this money, that over this period of time it just keeps getting carried forward. They're like, hey, we've got this money, we just help the other budgets.
And to pay for the direct expenses associated with ITAC, as they should be.
So it just hasn't been being spent every year?
It had been carried over.
Carry over, or
There have been years where the ITAC has chosen to forgo its allocation when they have enough carryover to cover costs in the next fiscal year, and then in that case it flows.
It's not just piling up in a...
Yeah, it flows to all the other projects and programs based on the hierarchy of how the sub-programs fall under the overall Transnet program.
Just wanted to make sure Dustin didn't have like a mitigation fund.
Oh.
We haven't been banking it. Right, we haven't been banking it
No.
unless we purposely carry it over. We've been
That's right.
forfeiting it, so to speak.
So you're really not asking for any, you're just taking the money that we're using and saying, hey, here, it's allocated over here. Okay.
Well, this is a change in terms of the staff using the budget, but
Right.
I don't see.
feels like an appropriate change.
And you're saying that the auditor actually identified the cost to be allocated? Or did I misunderstand what you're saying?
I think she said we now know the fiscal audit costs.
Over 10 years, the last 10 years.
Over the last 10 years, now we have a good idea, what the revenues that are coming in, the expenses associated with the ITAC, and so we're in a position to be able to.
And so who came up with the estimate of the staff cost?
The estimate of the staff cost is basically, it's probably more than that really, but it's based on who on staff is primarily working on your activities.
And how much of that time is not full-time.
So it would be fair to say that the staff cost is essentially the leftover after everything else is accounted for, and then it's just split amongst
No, it's based on, you know, looking at the staff that are generally either in attendance or directly supporting ITAC activities and preparing an estimate of number of hours from each of those staff and then just adding up what is that? That's how.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just so the 226 is based on you guys keep like timesheets or something like that, and so
Yes.
somebody looked at seeing how much time was spent by staff members on ITAC, and that's where the 226 comes from. Got it. Okay.
I would move approval of the recommendation as proposed by staff.
Second.
Second by Brad. Okay. Is there any other discussion or any other questions? All those in favor?
Good word.
Are you everybody? Everybody, it is unanimous.
Mr. Chair, can I go back to the annual report and the timing?
Yes.
Mariana, did you say that we're going to meet as a committee after this meeting?
Right, so we, staff will reach out to the subcommittee to see about your availability for a call or a meeting if you'd like this month. And then also staff will schedule meetings going forward.
Won't be necessary, because I looked at my schedule March and the June meetings, I'm not going to be here. So
You're not here March, okay.
I just realized that would be, if that's going to be a problem, or we can schedule something if there's.
We could probably
if the
schedule
three
a
of us
call
can-
or-
Can do something or meet at
It
another
doesn't
time.
have to be after the ITAC. So what we
Yeah.
could do is we could schedule for a call in March, not necessarily after the ITAC meeting if you're not here. And the June, by then it should be done. I don't anticipate a subcommittee meeting in June.
But are we looking at, you give us a draft, do we just, in the committee, we look at the initial draft, but on things that we would like to possibly change? I know this last time around, there were a lot of significant changes in how it looked. So I imagine we should meet instead of do a phone call. Is that, we can talk about that later, I
Right,
guess. but-
so February you could meet, March could be a phone call, or we could schedule a separate meeting and you can come down.
Okay.
That's fine, whatever works for you.
It's the three of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so
okay.
I'm
Right.
easy.
You let me, yeah. I just wasn't involved last time around. 2 years ago, I was involved.
Yeah.
Last year, you all spent a lot, it seemed to me, a lot of time.
It wasn't inordinate, and I think staff was really good.
It just looked at, I
giving
think it
us
was a lot
something,
of
yeah.
difference because it had to do with, didn't you have a separate report last year that you had the issue on
Well,
the
the whole
estimates,
the
the
whole PAYGO question was
yeah.
something we spent a
Yeah.
bunch of time on, but yeah, but we're expecting that you spend significantly more time to do a much better job this year.
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, we'll work around it.
Okay.
Thank you, Stuart.
Item 13, Transnet program review estimates. Don and
Tire traffic on
Jim.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here today to present the short-term revenue forecast that is brought here to ITAC and then to the Transportation Committee and to the board every February. And these are the estimates that allow SANDAG and our partner agencies to plan for capital projects and determine operating subsidies for fiscal years 2020 through 2024. So the attachment to the report provides the estimate for the overall Transnet program, and it includes a breakdown of the major corridors, new bus rapid transit and rail operations, the transit system improvements, and the local street improvement sub-programs. So the Transnet forecast is produced with a two-step method, and the first step is a 2-year near-term forecast that's based on the professional judgment of SANDAG staff, assessing the current year to date and the upcoming year. So in this case, it would be fiscal years 2019 and fiscal year 2020. And this first step is informed by 4 factors. First, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration's sales tax allocation formula. Next, the year-to-date sales tax collections. Then a forecast provided by SANDAG Sales Tax Revenue Consultant Union Services. And finally, the current and forecast general economic conditions. And then the next 4 years, fiscal years 2021 through 2024, are based on 3 variables. The population forecast from the California Department of Finance, a consensus of 3 independent national forecasts of per capita growth in retail sales, and that's IHS Global Insight, Moody's, and Woods & Pool. And then finally, the consensus projected inflation rate from those same sources. For fiscal year 2020, the estimate is just under $310 million, and it reflects a growth rate of 3%, which is roughly $9 million above the 2019 estimate. And for the full 5-year period, the total estimated Transnet is approximately $1.67 billion. The high and low ranges on the attachment represent a simple plus or minus 5%, and it's provided as a range for information and planning purposes. However, the agencies can program or commit funds in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program up to the mid-range amount. So the estimates are scheduled to be reviewed by the Transportation Committee at its February 15th meeting for recommendation to the Board of Directors at its meeting on February 22nd. And upon board approval, the estimates will be released to transit and local agencies for planning and programming use. So that concludes the report, and Jim Miller and I are here if you have any questions.
I'm curious in the range, the 95%, 105% range. If in the past you had used that range with estimates going back, would that range encompass, 100% of the variance or not? Do you happen to know?
It'll get us pretty close. We see, the Great Recession brought us down about 9% on 1 year. That is a extreme case. Generally speaking, you would stay within that cone of uncertainty. Now, the further out you get, 5-year out, you're probably in less charted waters. Again, if you look at the example of the Great Recession, we went down and we didn't really catch back up. We just basically shifted the baseline and grew from there. So historically, yes, we would stay within that, but again, you have the extreme example of the Great Recession, which put us outside.
Great, thanks.
Questions? It's just an information item. So take it. Thank you, guys. Set a record. Come on, maybe not. Stuart had a good one. He's back. Quickest meeting. That concludes our agenda. The next meeting is Wednesday, March 13th. If anybody knows off the top of their head, I'm not going to make it. Brad, okay. I'm not sure if did Dick say a couple months?
He said February and March, no,
Okay, so
likely.
Dick's not.
March 13th. Yeah.
I'm
I'll
good.
be here. God will.
I'm leaving that afternoon for something, but I'll be here, yeah.
Okay. Do we move for adjournment? If so, I will so move.
Use the gavel.
And we are adjourned.
The
They're never going to